To start, why don't you said militant atheist as a topic of your talk. I want to know what you mean by that title.
Well, I am a military member, proud military member, and I think that is important to note because I do think that the military has a very kind of right wing perception, meaning that most military members, or traditionally, the military has been looked at as something of the conservative kind of mindset, which I am here to tell you is incorrect. But more importantly, I think that it's such a taboo to be somebody who's works for the government or is in the military and then also be outspoken about things that are sensitive, either politically or culturally, socially. And I disagree with that. I think that I have a responsibility as a citizen to be loud and be vocal, and not try and hold myself back because I could be, I don't know, maybe doing something wrong, breaking my oath as a military officer, or misrepresenting the government in some way. I don't think that I'm doing that. I think that for all intents and purposes, I'm actually in line with that. But I also think that it is not common for people, at least where I come from, to be outspoken about these things. I don't get any family support. None of my friends, very few of my friends are supportive of me. And I've even had people, like even in my own wedding party, who have turned their backs on me because of my open religious views, or lack of religion views, if you will. And so I think that there is a lot of discussion to be had about where religion falls in to society and culture, where it is appropriate in the military. I have experience with that. And so I thought maybe militant atheism was a fun way to kind of speak to my outspokenness, but also my experience as a professional. And I'm happy to talk about anything that anybody wants to talk about with regard to those topics. I will say that my views and opinions are my own, do not represent any branch of the military or the U.S. government, Department of Defense. And yeah, that's how I came up with that. So, what do you guys want to know?
So obviously, let's start with something simple. I mean,
Yeah,
you have undoubtedly heard the canard of that there are no atheists in foxholes,
yeah,
and so you know your experience, with that, and kind of talking with other people in the military.
yeah. So, well, it's kind of twofold because, in large part, I don't really discuss religion at work, or typically have not discussed religion, at least as an officer. I am an officer. I wasn't always. I came into the military enlisted. When you're enlisted, you have a little bit more of a tight knit community with the people that are around you, and um, those kind of conversations are a little bit more prominent. So earlier in my career, it was more common to have conversations about religion, about politics. As an officer these days, though, last 8 years or so, that hasn't been the case. In any case, though, a lot of people are, there's always kind of this, and like I alluded to earlier, there's kind of this traditional American religious value when it comes to the military. Okay, Christian, to be more precise. And people are a lot of times pretty surprised to hear that somebody's an atheist, especially in my earlier years. 10 years ago, being an atheist in the military isn't what it is today. Okay. It's a little bit more common and a little bit more obvious. But, as far as the atheist and foxholes thing, I think people tend to not really believe that you don't believe in something. And I have opinions about that. I think that indoctrination runs deep. And as you guys may know, at Recovering from Religion, recovery is a lifelong journey. And even in my situation, I felt like I was already an atheist in 2013 when I was in an enemy attack. And my mind immediately went to, well, God, if you're real, get me the hell out of this, you know? And so I think that kind of thing is, it's a remnant of the religion that I was brought up in, but also kind of a knee jerk reaction to somebody who has been indoctrinated by religion. And then for the people that would be willing to exploit your trauma and impose their religion, a way to say, ha, see, you're not an atheist. But, I don't think that my religion or my reaction in a situation like that, when it comes to potentially entertaining religion, necessarily takes away the atheist label from me, or the atheist experience from me, if you will. I think that, everybody, when they think they're facing the end, kind of has a right to say, oh, what's next? Even if you really don't believe what's next, or that there is something next. But yeah, I think that in my experience, largely, I come across a lot of Christians in the military. Many of them have a hard time believing that somebody is really an atheist,
Hmm.
or, there are tons of stories like mine, that kind of resonate, with other people. I think that everybody has a questioning moment when they think they're at the end. And so that kind of just adds fuel to the fire. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, because it's one of those things where, because you're absolutely right. I work with a lot of veterans, and it is a common theme that I run into of like, there's this, if you are outside of the ideological box, even if it's only perceived, you can almost feel that kind of like, I can't really share certain things. And unfortunately, it's often not true.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more versatility of thinking that exists in the military than people are often
Oh,
fully aware
absolutely.
of. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like
I love
expectations.
I love telling people that when I came into the military, it was a don't ask, don't tell community. And now I have supervised transgender people. I have
Mhm.
Muslim people under my supervision. I have people of all races, all walks of life, and it is a beautiful thing. I am a firm believer that diversity is the strength of our military. And I have never been more proud to be serving than I am today. I have been at times incredibly conflicted,
Mm.
especially when you go to these events that are supposed to be all inclusive, but they then take a turn toward Christianity, holiday parties, not Christmas party, for example, or a generic prayer at a Thanksgiving dinner that ultimately, ends up with calls to the Prince of Peace, Jesus, and
Mm.
you can't really escape it. So I am incredibly happy to see diversity continue to grow, and I think that we're in a good spot. The future is looking bright.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so part of the intro and part of your bio noted that you are part of the atheist community of Austin's weekly call-in show, Talk Heathen,
Yes.
um, and then also part of their nightly talk show, The Nonprofits.
Yes.
I guess you spoke about it a bit as far as like why you feel like speaking out as a military person. What brings you to speak out and really just put yourself out there that much? Like what's the I don't know, what's the story that
Yeah.
you're wanting people to hear?
So in the intro, which was also noted, was that I really shed the final shrouds of Christianity when I joined the military. It was taken away from my out of my comfort zone. I grew up not having conversations really about God at all.
Hmm.
We were cultural Christians, so we went to church,
Uh-huh.
right? We went to church on the weekends or on Sundays. Maybe sometimes I had like confirmation or communion class, or whatever it was, when I was like 13 or something. But you know, I wasn't getting household lessons on Christianity, on the Bible. My parents have no idea what's in the Bible. It was apparent. It became more apparent as I got older. Nobody really knows what's in the Bible, in my family or in my community where I come from. We just were Christians because that was what you did, right? You went to church, you graduated high school, you started a family, they went to church, you worked. This is what we do, right? And that's kind of the community I came up in, a blue collar family. Nobody really went to college. We kind of just followed the followed the stencil, if you will, followed the outline that was put in front of us. So, I had trouble with a lot of the things I heard, and I noticed that nobody really ever talked about this stuff. And I'm kind of just like, I thought this was really important, but we're not really involved in this outside of the 1 hour a week. When I finally decided to leave New York and join the military, I got thrust into a bunch of different, among a bunch of different people. And a lot of them were Christians, but at the same time, I was meeting people that had really different worldviews, cultural views from where I lived in the Northeast, and they came from all over the place, etc. Um, I found a couple of other atheists and got to talking and was like, wow, I didn't know other people felt this way. And then I found, after doing research, I would sit in my barracks for hours, like researching YouTube or the internet. And I came across the atheist community of Austin. Of course, the old guard that is no longer around with the ACA, Matt Hillahunty, was incredibly influential with me. Tracy Harris, Jen Peebles was in the military at the time, and I felt a great deal of a connection to the things she had to say. A lot of really talented people, but overall, leaving out names and titles, I was like, holy crap, people are out here having conversations like this. I can't believe that people are talking openly about this. I feel this way. I need somebody to talk to. And I didn't really reach out to the ACA for a long time. I mean, this was like 2010, 11, 12-ish time period. It wasn't until like 2022 where I decided, all right, I'm ready. I had gone to school a little bit more. I got my master's degree in international relations. I traveled the world. I experienced different cultures, been to a lot of countries. I had a lot of interactions with people. And I decided my voice is ready to be heard. And I contacted the ACA and I said, hey, look, I don't know if I have what you're looking for, but I'd like to chat. Maybe I could be a host. And they took me. They put me on the nonprofits, and I think it worked out because then I was on Truth Wanted, which is another one of their productions, and then very soon after that, they put me on Talk Heathen and then the Atheist Experience, and then decided, hey, we want to bring you back for Talk Heathen a couple times a month or once a month, really. So that's the way it's been for about a year and a half, and I still do the nonprofits. Yeah,
Okay.
love doing the nonprofits. I think that is a really overlooked show. It's on a few times a week, but we cover the articles of the stories that are happening every day in real life. The government, the separation of church and state is really prominent in the talking points that we have on that show. And it lays the groundwork for almost everything else we talk about on all the other shows. So I think it's really important to keep going in that direction. But I digress.
Yeah. Okay. So it's so you bring up the separation of church and state, and you mentioned earlier, like sometimes, I mean, let's admit it, you get a little conflicted at times with roles and choices that you may have to make. Um, we're not here to hash out all the politics or whatnot, um, but it's often noted, with if you're an atheist, where's your morality coming from?
Uh-huh.
So how do you kind of work through that? I mean,
Well, so my morality comes from knowing right and wrong based on what I would want to happen to me. Right. I think that is obvious. I think everybody knows that for, in some way, shape or form. Like it could be clearly explained like, hey, look, I don't want you to punch me in the face. Right. So I'm not going to go around punching people in the face. I know that there are expectations that we have as a society in order to live together. Right. And so I think that's an easy part. Like I actually find it easier to explain morality as an atheist than I did ever as a Christian, because then you have to navigate through these loopholes or these obstacles, if you will, that the Bible gives you, because it's not a moral book. It's actually a pretty horrible book. There's a horrible set of circumstances that create the way you're supposed to live. Now, from a military perspective, I actually really take comfort in the fact that we have incredibly objective rules and regulations that we have to follow. That if everybody follows it, nobody's going to be disparaged or biased, right? If the rules are adhered to. I have Norse pagan people that I supervise. Like I said, Muslims that I supervise. If I just refer to the regulation, which by the way, I don't need the regulation to act morally toward them or make ethical decisions for them and for their careers. I know how to lead them and help them along and help them succeed. And I want to do that. I don't care what they believe, right? But if, let's say, I was so challenged by my own biases, if I read the regulations and just led based off of those, I wouldn't have to be challenged by my own biases, right? Now, I say that a little bit loosely because there's always room for bias. But I think that, the leaders, I've been so lucky because the leaders that I work with, the people that I work with above me in any chain of command that I have are so, they try so hard. They pride themselves in being objective and treating everybody equally. And it's not what most people think the military is. And so, on that note, professionally speaking, I think I can draw my morals from a code that I am thankful to have. Other than that, outside, I think that as humans, even though I don't believe morality to be objective, I think that there are general wants and needs that we all want, that we all require, right? And it's probably not that difficult to sort those out. Now, you get into our more of our, and I don't want to go off a cliff here, but but it's like my favorite movie line ever. And it comes from Independence Day with, of course, Will Smith, who I'm not happy with still, but and Jeff Goldblum, and I think Jeff Goldblum's character said, a person is smart, but people are stupid, right? And a person can be very smart and can navigate through morality, like how to treat other people. But then you get into groupthink and our tribalistic nature, and you get cults that develop and crazy things that people come up with, and it's hard to help themselves. And I think that's the real fight that we're in, on a constant basis. It's like group versus group. On an individual basis, it's so easy to get along with your neighbor, right? But there are ideologies that clash, and that's where the real trouble comes in.
No, absolutely. So I'm curious. So it's it's funny you bring up the individual and group, and frankly, quoting an awesome movie. So always a
Yeah.
good time with that. But uh, so groups. Do you ever find difficulty in being an individual within the strong collective group of the military and being able to stand up for um, something different, or finding that sometimes the group kind of goes along and coalesces around something that may not be super helpful? Again, I understand can't necessarily always go into specifics, but
Well,
just
yeah,
navigating that.
no, that's okay. I think that's a suitable, a perfectly good question. I could definitely speak to that. I think I have become used to being the outspoken one, but I'm not unreasonable. And in large part, people have been pretty reasonable in hearing me out and addressing my concerns. Okay. Um, Even if it conflicts, like, I have a commander who solicits feedback all the time and will allow me to tell him what if I disagree with him. Um, and that's just one example of me being able to be outspoken, right? But I think in large part, the groups are just waiting for somebody to be outspoken. And I'm usually that person. And then some people might say, you know what? Yeah, they have a point. And I'm one of those people. But you know what? In any group that I'm in, I'm usually not the only one. The military likes to send its people to training courses regularly. Every couple of years, you could expect, all right, you're a lieutenant, you're going to go off and do this lieutenant's course with other lieutenants, or you're a captain, you're going to do that. Excuse me, every rank or maybe every milestone you hit, there's some kind of training you got to go do, and you sit in these group sessions and you work out issues that might be challenging, and there's always conflicting. There's one or two people that are more outspoken than the other. I think I'm one of those people, and I think that everybody is very accommodating. It's almost taboo to not be accommodating. I think that if I were to ever have an issue or any pushback, it would probably come from one person and not a group. But I do think that it's easy for a group to go together. I think it's easy for a group to go together. It's also easy to break up that group think.
Yeah. When I imagine, so there's, some have, noticed some of the similarities at times in that kind of group mentality between, well, anything. I mean, religion, military, anytime there's a group that gets together that has a structure, a strong one in place, there's always that, like, you know, but I have a question.
Yeah, yeah,
Hand
yeah.
raised and really wanting, and you stick out, but you hope you don't get knocked down. Um, for those who aren't fully aware, could you describe like some of the, perhaps mechanisms that do exist? It seems like because a lot of what goes on in the military is a little bit opaque to civilians. So is there like mechanism in place like, hey, I've got a question. I have a, concern or, whatnot.
Sure. So let's see. Well, all right, let me go through a couple of channels, like if somebody
Sure.
has an issue. Okay.
Mhm.
So every unit in the military has, well, in the Air Force, I'm in the Air Force. The Army operates pretty similarly, but you have what's called a first sergeant. And a first sergeant is usually like the commander's right hand enlisted person that handles discipline, handles any kind of family care or kind of not your run of the mill type of thing. Their business is people. Their business is taking care of their people. You could always go to them for resources. You could go to them for one-on-one kind of feedback, or that's usually like your friendly ear, your friendly shoulder, right? Even if they're not friendly, the role kind of requires it. We could go another route, like the more legal routes. Let's say there's a case where you think discrimination has taken place. There is the inspector general. Every unit has an inspector general, and an inspector general makes sure that processes and policies are working effectively. You could make a report there. You could you have the military equal opportunity office, which handles discrimination as well. Actually, the IG would be more like a processes and policies type thing, where discrimination and bigotry and things like that would fall under military equal opportunity, making sure that no matter what somebody's race, religion, creed, or sex or gender are, that they're treated equally, and that is an avenue you can take to solve problems. Usually, it first starts with you going to your commander though and saying, "Hey, there's this issue," and the commanders are usually pretty objective. I mean, you get to become a commander because not always, but most of the time, you know, the commander has demonstrated some kind of leadership that encompasses care for everybody, and so that is kind of the apparatus where when it comes to taking care of concerns like those things. I have exercised those in my career. When I pointed out discrimination towards somebody because of their race and their religion, I have pointed out discrimination against people because of their sex, and I have followed multiple avenues to get that taken care of. But you want to start at the lowest level first. I've never went right to the top. You know, I always go straight to the person and say, "Hey, I don't like what you did," and usually it's squashed there, but not always. I will give you. So I want to harken back to something you asked me though. I have a really good example. So when it comes to religion in the military, and it comes to the crowd, and it comes to groupthink, I would say religion is probably the area where people just shut up the most, right? So like at a holiday party, which is supposed to be now people can talk about their religion, but generally speaking, it's supposed to be all inclusive, right? Not reflecting one kind of religion. And then you have like the not the commander, but like the equivalent of the commander, the highest ranking civilian in the unit gets up, and that person's spouse gets up, and they together do a prayer for Jesus. And there you have the microphone, and they're saying, when I say Jesus, what words come to mind? And I wanted to be like, fiction, but I didn't do that. I didn't do
Right.
that because I'm not an idiot, I understand I'm part of a traditionally Christian structure. And someday I'm going to need to get promoted. And is this battle worth picking? So that's a real example. I chose to remain silent, even though me and I know several of the people in my unit at the table with me at that party were all atheists. And we know that because in the military, when everybody bows their head to pray, which happens all the time, we're all kind of looking around having a party. We're like, oh, I didn't know. I had no idea. Yeah.
Kind of like,
yeah, right. Exactly.
Like, I see you. I see you over there.
Yeah. When all the religious people are bowing their heads, they have no idea about the events that are taking place without them. But we're all there. But yeah, I will choose not to speak up, when it comes to things like that, because now if somebody said, hey, if it were a staff meeting or something and somebody said, hey, we're all going to pray, I'd be like, the hell we are, that would be a situation where I would speak up. I've been in situations where we were all sitting down and the chaplain walked in and everybody stood up, but I stayed sitting. I was like, okay, nobody told anybody to stand up, and that's not something you do. You just you don't do that for a chaplain. Nobody stands up for a chaplain, but everybody, one person stood up and everybody else said, I'm going to get up too. Later. Yeah. And I was just like, and I sat, and I don't know. And I was in the front row, and the chaplain could clearly see that I was not going to go along. I don't know if anybody behind me sat, but I felt really proud of myself. I was like, this is healthy for everybody. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over here, but I had so many experiences, and after we got done talking about that before, I was like, oh shit, I should have talked about these. Sorry. Can I curse? Can I say the S word? Sorry.
Yes, you can swear.
All right, cool.
It's all right.
Yeah. I do actually have a question. So you've been in the military for 14 years?
15, almost 15.
15 years.
Yeah.
So in the 15 years that you've been in the military, have you seen any major changes in regards to religious belief and atheism, and how people have treated as far as policy wise, or has it remained pretty constant since you've joined?
No, I have seen a great deal of fluctuation, and that doesn't come. So policy wise, there are a few things. Okay. Number one, I know that I mentioned don't ask, don't tell already, but I think that was grounded in religious belief. I do. The only reason that homosexuality would even be considered illegal is because of its culturally Christian roots, right? And that filtered into the military. It's just where the military comes from, cultural Christian or cultural Christianity. And so we maintained that for a long time, right? First, it used to be that you weren't allowed in the military. Then it was, don't ask, don't tell. All right, you can be gay, just don't talk about it. And then that was overturned, and I was very proud of that. Then in the oath, whenever you take an oath, the end is so help me God. That actually didn't become optional until about 2015. So before that, you had to say it, which I don't think a lot of people knew, but I always said it anyway. That's one of those things. So the last time I was promoted was in 2020. And I said, even though I'm an atheist, even though I was an out atheist, I still said, so help me God at the end. I chose not to have a chaplain at my ceremony, but I just, for tradition purposes and to not rock the boat at all, I just did it. Okay. And that was my choice. I decided I'm not going to do that again for the next time that comes along. But at least, I'm making some little changes, but those little changes have happened incrementally over time. And so I don't know that they've come with policy per se, but they have come with perception, and they've come in action. They've come in people's attitudes. Whereas I used to see people be like, Muslims, now it's like, no, they're a Muslim. It's their right. Like, those are tones. Those are thought processes that have graduated from where I stand anyway, and from what I can see. I had somebody in one of these groups I was talking about say, can we all agree that Muslims are the enemy? I mean, how convenient to say at a time and place where there were no other Muslims in the group. We were all white and black and, probably all Christian, right? So nowadays, I recently witnessed, I shouldn't say witness because it wasn't, I don't mean this in a bad way, but there was some, excuse me, clarification that we needed over policies for a female airman to wear their hijab. And one of one of the people involved, who was a high-ranking person, said, "No, this is their right. This is what they should be. They should be allowed to do this, and I'm going to fight this." And I was like super proud because there was not a lot of that in 2010, 2011, 2012 when I was new, right? But now there seems to be even more, and our military is made up of even more diverse people, which I believe is a strength again.
Yeah, I that was a really some really good points because
Yeah.
we kind of I think for the common person, the military has this very like hom homogenous sort of like even keel line that it doesn't change, it doesn't evolve because we're not on the end to end thing, on the day to day aspect of it. So the fact that you're seeing those changes is and also that luckily there's more diversity, which I think is speaks to how the military evolves just like the rest of society does.
Yeah. And, there's another thing to that, too. So the military, I think, used to be a reflection of society. Now we lead society, right? When COVID hit, we were the first people to go remote and make things work. We were the first people to keep coming into work masked up, completely masked up. When everybody was having debates over what's right and what's wrong as far as the mask, we were just masked up. We were keeping clean. We were coming up with ways to operate by minimum manning and by working virtually, and we were ahead of the game. We now lead society, and I think that taking these approaches to take care of LGBTQ people, for one, which I think is one of the military's greatest accomplishments, right? And take care of people from a diverse group of religions, and like somebody in the chat just mentioned, adding atheism and humanism to the Department of Defense faith and belief codes in 2017. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know, these are great accomplishments, and these make things easier for society, as opposed to religious organizations which have to play catch up, right? I think the military is no longer playing catch up like the more traditionally uh, cultural Christian communities and religious communities. The church is dying for membership. I mean, they will do anything, and they're trying to do anything. There are some churches now that are like, we'll come out and you can get married here if you're gay. Even the Pope, although the Pope hasn't turned the corner, is still like, we will bless marriage between homosexuals. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell does that even mean anyway? But thanks for not, thanks for being cryptic. These people that do this type of stuff are just like, let's try and trick people to think that we're on their side, so they come and they give us money. And they're having to play catch up. Non-denominational churches more popular than ever, right? Because they don't want to look like old churches. They want to play, rock and roll and do weird things that the church never did, right? And be weird and be cool. They're trying to catch up to society so bad, and it's almost kind of I'm embarrassed for them, honestly. It's a little bit pathetic, but I think that I'm in a good spot as a military member where I watch the military say, how can we be the leaders in diversity? And it's awesome. It is so awesome.
That actually reminds me of, I grew up Baptist, very conservative, and probably one of the first churches still was organ music, and and having to dress up like everybody did their Sunday best kind of thing. And by the time had left the church, had gone all the way through like the debates over, do we have a guitar? Like, do we have this?
Yeah.
So it's just it's fascinating on, like, as some of the comments noted in the chat are going, it's like it has been interesting that for an institution like the military that has like Helen noted, a reputation for being, we don't change, everything is here. Often, not as fast sometimes as some of us would like, but still, it's like change is still happening and it's good. And
That's
it's
right.
and the fact that the leading is going on there at all is it's just completely contrary to the common understanding of it. So that's just fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So, a couple of, we'll kind of go around a little bit, but there was one question that had come up around, like, people who join, and particularly, you've been around now for, you said, 15 years, and in positions of leadership. Um, what do you find? Have you noticed that there's been a change in why people, sign up? Is there any? Do you know people leaving, like, homes of abuse, or for whatever reason, or just generally, like, any shifts in rationale?
Well, I think I've seen the full gamut. I definitely, I think closer to um 9/11, which I mean, I didn't join until 2010, but yeah, that was closer to 9/11 than we are now. I think I
Mhm.
used to see more people joining for patriotism. Not to
Mhm.
say that the people who are joining now aren't patriotic, but I do think that there is a pathway to success that they are looking for. And they recognize the military as one that is a viable option, but also one that is not so harsh toward people who don't look like the traditional military member.
Mhm.
I think that people expect a lot less pushback from the power structure in place in the military, and they see a way for school to get paid for, to have a steady income. Yes, a lot of people come from very poor families. A lot of people join to take care of their families. That doesn't make them any less patriotic. In fact,
Mhm.
I didn't even join for patriotism. I joined. I just couldn't find my way, and I was kind of tired of searching, and I thought, let me give myself over to a structure that's in place. They can mold me into a better version of myself, and let's see how that goes. I'll give it a shot for 4 years, and I stayed for a while. I think it had a lot of benefits, and it made me really happy with where I was in life. I think a lot of people see that. They see the military increasingly becoming more accommodating.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people that I work with a lot of new recruits. Okay. People who come in and I'm in a position where I get to lead them and help them uh, become leaders. And, a lot of them want purpose. They want purpose. And they come from families of immigrants. They come from places that are horrible to women. Uh, and now they find a place that's they come across a place that says, wow, they value diversity and they value strong female leadership, because we do. That is just, I mean, hands down, one of the things we look for when it comes to leaders. It's what is the historically untapped potential, and then we go after those people to say, hey, 50 years ago, you had no chance. Now you've got every chance in the world. We've got 4-star generals that look just like you and think just like you. Why not give it a shot? But I do see less and less people joining because they want to serve their country, even though I still
Mhm.
see that. I do still see that, especially from military families. People want to follow that culturalism like we talked about. It's not in the form of religion anymore, but now maybe in the form of military service. They still want to follow that outline that's in front of them, and so many young people come and do that. uh, but yeah, there's a wide variety of people. I would just say it's less common for me to hear as a response, because I love this country and I want to serve my country. It's more like I feel like I could get a really good training in mechanical engineering and then become an engineer
Mhm.
after I do my 4 years.
Kind
Yeah,
of like, this is a great opportunity to move my life forward, kind of thing.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what my son joined. He
yeah,
joined for economic, education and economic opportunities, and but I don't think anyone should begrudge for anyone to give service, even, and also get the benefit of giving that service.
yeah.
So, it doesn't make anyone more or less patriotic.
I agree. I agree. And that value is bestowed upon them at some point. That camaraderie sets in, and regardless of who they are or what their background is, they start to recognize the value of diversity, which I think is important. So that will come in time for everybody.
Well, I'm curious as well. It's like that leads into, so as a mental health therapist, I work with a lot of veterans,
Yeah.
most and veterans, a couple of active, but usually not. Um, and 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 often you often talk about like transition out of, and noting just how much the community that was found. And, given the current kind of concerns over the kind of, I mean, shoot, the Attorney General of the United States has referred to it as an epidemic of loneliness. I mean, it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like this huge disruption in how we connect with one another. And just, I don't know, just kind of reflection on how people find that. If they come into it's kind of going hunkered down, like, what's gonna happen? I've heard awful things, and then like, in fact, you just mentioned it. You find that like that the brotherhood, the togetherness, and then go, wait, we all we're all here with a single purpose, and
Yeah.
trying to helping each other out, and that's just such a different feel.
Yeah. And bringing this back to religion, I have no
Mhm.
problem that there is Christianity in the military, but I am happy to see that it is a decreasingly Christian organization, a Christian structure, right? A lot of the old rules represented where America came from. Now it's where is America going? And the rules reflect a new mindset. And I think that, you know, nobody says anymore, nobody invokes, they don't invoke their God as much as they used to. And even in 15 years, I've seen that change. And that actually is a huge weight off a lot of people's shoulders. Whether you're wearing a hijab or you've got a beard because you're a Norse pagan, um, not even bringing it up is actually quite a relief. And like I said, I hardly talk about it anymore these days. I don't know if it's because my position has changed or just because we're starting to recognize what's productive and what's not. Politics is another thing I don't really talk about anymore either. That was happening a lot in my early days, but it's not so
Hmm.
much happening anymore.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. Like of all the of all the things that it's an extension of politics, and for that not to be talked about very much,
You know what
that's
though? Like
interesting.
whatever happens, like whoever becomes president, for example, like we have to do our best no matter what. So it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter. It
Yeah.
honestly, to a military person, you know, when I'm in uniform, it's almost a relief to not be political, to be apolitical, because it
Mhm.
doesn't matter who the commander in chief is. Like I have a job to do, and I've served under three presidents now, and I've done my job the same. I think my life has changed very little. I mean, my life has changed, but not because of the president. The rules don't necessarily change all that much, and we may even be in a point, and I think that I'm not going to say names, but we may come to have to do things in spite of who the president is. We might actually have to think harder about how to do the right thing because of a president that's maybe their mind is not in the right place. So that is something that I think we have witnessed before. I think that there have been members of presidential cabinets and staffs that had to keep presidents at bay. And I think that filters into the military. And so a lot of us, you know, kind of wonder how is it that we can best perform and accomplish our mission and our objectives without or while ensuring good order and discipline.
Mm.
Whether a person is Christian, whether your leader is, whoever they are, we all find a way to work together.
Nicely stated. I like that. Well, and you mentioned,
Mm.
kind of getting things done. So, you know, had one question came up around, which I think was addressed in the chat a little bit, but can broaden it out to, requirements for joining. Um, I'm starting laughing a bit because I'm like, this is not supposed to be like a recruitment show.
Yeah.
But but it is one of those where
You're not endorsing
this is not an
joining the
endorsement. This is not.
military at RfR.
Yeah.
We
Um,
are very supportive of our veterans, though.
yes. And so, noting, I guess part of it goes into some of the changes they may have seen just in the last 15 years of people joining and coming from disparate backgrounds and including health, and the system that is in place to help people get to a certain level of being able to do the job.
Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to joining, and I don't, I'm going to be very vague as well, because I don't want
Yeah.
to start shedding a whole lot of light on what it is I exactly do. I mean, I do know a little bit about the recruitment process, and I know
Mm,
that the standards for joining are very different for the standards of people who are already in.
mm,
If you, for example, I think I saw in the chat like ADHD. Um, if you come into the military and you have ADHD and it's documented, there are certain requirements that you will have to provide, and it may be a little bit more stringent on you as opposed to if you're already in and then you get found to have it, right? And they may have commonalities. Like, I think there's a certain amount of time that you have to be off of medication before you can be considered for entry. But if you get found and you're already in it, as long as you didn't lie upon entry, um, you've already demonstrated that you can operate off of it, right?
mhm.
So there, I guess therein lies the commonality. But there's a lot. I think there's it's just a lot more difficult. Like, if you get injured on active duty, right, or in the reserves or guard, you're going to get physical therapy, you're going to get surgery, you're going to find a way to stay in. If you come in with an injury, I'm sorry, come back when
Yeah.
you're not injured. So yeah, the requirements are certainly different to come in versus when you're already in. But at that point, by the time you've been in, so much time and money has been invested into your training that you are now a versatile weapon, if you will. Whether you're an intelligence officer or analyst, or you do cybersecurity, or whatever the job is, it's you're kind of a weapon, because that's the mindset you operate in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and people who are recruiters are not allowed to necessarily turn people away because of medical conditions necessarily, unless they meet some of those things. So some of those requirements. So, like, if somebody said, "Well, I had mental health issues or something," well, I'd be like, "Okay, you're going to get a medical evaluation as part of your recruitment process. So you just need to talk to the doctor about that. And I'm not a doctor." So that's kind of the way those conversations go. Um, yeah. And then,
Hmm.
of course, when you're on active duty and you're found to have mental health problems, the military will try and help you work through that. A chaplain is one way that people do that. And I think it's a great thing that if you can go to a religious leader and get help. Of course, I have some qualms. And again, these thoughts and opinions are my own, but I have qualms with religious leaders being expected to perform mental health counseling, even if they are unbiased. I think that's one of my, I personally think that goes against the establishment clause. I,
Hmm.
I, I, I mean, obviously the government doesn't see that way, and the chaplain is there for other reasons. But to have a spiritual leader also giving mental health counseling, but hey, we'll help anybody. It's not going to be spiritually based. In order to get your job, you have to be like sponsored by a church and have a master's in theology. I mean, how is that not an endorsement of religion? In my opinion, if you're going to have somebody give mental health counseling, have them give mental health counseling. You can have spiritual leaders available, but they don't also need to be mental health counselors. I don't that for me is a problem.
Hmm.
In any case, so I digress. Of course, I still find chaplains, like, if you're an atheist and there's a chaplain that's willing to help you and you've got no other resource available at the time, go see the chaplain. I mean, go see the chaplain. Their job is actually to get you help if you don't want to speak to them, to find somebody that's a humanist, or to find somebody that's a Muslim or Hindu or what have you. So that's a good thing too. But yeah.
Well, and that brings up, I know the American Humanist Association has a chaplaincy program, if I'm remembering right. At the very least, I know that there are humanist chaplains. So it's kind of an interesting expansion on that. And as noted, as a comment in the chat around chaplains are not trained to give mental health care, which I think you already noted. Um, of course, no, generally they're not. Um, but then that gets into, how you are defining mental health care. Is it in fact
Yeah.
are you getting, there's a difference between getting supportive help and going through the process of diagnostic formalized, mental health, treatment. And that's a whole, can of worms. Don't necessarily
Yeah.
need to open up.
No,
But
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah. Perhaps they're not trained to give mental health care. They often fall into the category of mental health support, whether it's, it's not accidental. I mean, there are people that, even if it's an incorrect understanding, there's a general understanding that if you're having a hard time, you go speak to a chaplain. I mean, that is hands down an understanding that everybody has. So what's on black and white sometimes doesn't necessarily pan out the way it functions. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. That's how change happens. You stumble across something that's working and you say, well, why don't we just do this? But in this case, I'm saying, why are we doing this? So maybe, I don't know, maybe those changes, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that chaplains never help anybody. I'm just saying it doesn't need to be exclusively related to getting help.
right.
Why, for the longest time, just Christianity was the chaplain, right? There was only Christian chaplains, but they could get you outside help. And I think it was in the last, I don't know exactly when, 15 to 20 years, they added Buddhist, Jewish, and Islamic chaplains but that's still only 4. What about all the others? So there's got to be a way to be all encompassing. Like, it's either all or none, in my opinion. And yeah, I would say that speaks to the establishment clause. That's where I get back to the establishment clause. Like, in the public sector, hey, it's either all or nothing. I don't want your stuff in the public. So
No, fair. Well, and what's interesting there is, just as a historical note, like, it was the military that helped initially expand, the whole notion of mental health therapists and clinicians into the public, because there was such a need.
yeah,
I forget the Army general that was part of it, but anyway. But yeah, it's just kind of the enmeshment in social services across has been ongoing for quite
yeah,
some time.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, mental health is important.
mhm.
It's you nurse an injury, you got to nurse your health, your mental health as well, right? I wish more people understood that. Actually, my nephew, who's a teenager, told me that last week, and I was like, wow, like, that's really cool that you know that.
It's a growing appreciation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think that's another thing. In a very male dominant industry, military and government, I think a lot of times men generally didn't talk about their feelings. Now it's common. It's pretty. In fact, when I showed up to my the unit that I'm at now, when I showed up, I went and got a physical, and the doctor's like, "Want to see a psychiatrist?" And I said, "Okay." He was just like, I just figured I'd throw it out there. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll talk to somebody. I'll check, do a checkup and see how I'm doing. But it's just common now. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, like if you start putting your kids in therapy at like 12, 13 years old, and then they grow up and they're just like, oh, this is just like everything else.
Yeah. But we've talked a lot about the military, and I hope everybody enjoyed my conversation. I mean, I'm willing to pivot if you want, because I was hoping.
Oh, you can.
I know that we don't have a lot of time, and I kind of wanted to talk about my deconstruction, because this is recovering from religion, and
Yes.
I feel like I am not recovered. Like, I am not fully recovered as an atheist. I don't know that I have, even though I use the term like shred the shrouds of Christianity, but my mind still goes places that I wish it wouldn't sometimes. And I think that for anybody listening, they might struggle with that same thing too. I felt like once I got over the fear of hell, which I think came earlier for me than most people. I think the fear of hell is the thing that most people that are struggling with religion or struggling with religious indoctrination struggle with the most. For me, I think compared to those most other people, it came earlier in the process. But my mind still goes places like, well, this is part of the plan. right? Like something happens to me and I go, well, this is meant to be. Or, and it may only last a split second, or I may have to correct myself. But those off roads into religious thinking are so ingrained in my brain that I can't really ever get rid of them. You know, I know that I'm a non-believer. I know that, and I think that I spoke to that a little bit earlier when I was in an enemy attack and I thought I was going to die. You know, I said, well, you know, if you're real, you know, get me the hell out of this. And thinking back in hindsight, it's like, well, what did you expect? You know, to say that there's no atheists in foxholes, I mean, that could be speaking to the impact indoctrination has on somebody and not validating their beliefs. You know, that's not a validation of my belief. It's a validation of the harsh reality of indoctrination. I was brainwashed essentially for I don't know, 18 years in church, taught horrible things. Jews go to hell, gay people go to hell. All these things. I don't think my parents had any idea what I was being told. But that sticks with you after 18 years, and now at the age of almost 42, I still haven't gotten rid of some of these things. So it's as simple as like thinking as I'm getting signs from dead relatives. I know that I'm not getting signs, but like I used to think I was getting signs, and so I'll see something happen or have an experience, and I'm like, oh, my grandmother, and it never really goes away. It's an act, it's a constant action. So I want to throw that out there for anybody who's listening, anybody who might be struggling with their religion, and say, hey, I'm a host on atheist talk shows, and I still struggle. And so you shouldn't feel bad about yourself because you have to go through a recovery. Recovery might not ever have a goalpost. It might just be a constant effort.
Well, it sounds like it's one of those, besides veterans as well, there's an overlap as well then with religious trauma they work with. And one, thank you for sharing, because two, that is rather prevalent. Well, shoot, I'm 45 years old, deconverted 23 years ago, and still have moments of similar where, the fear of hell is still there. There's still old thoughts, poke fun at the fact that sometimes it's easy to almost hop into that preaching mentality.
Yeah.
Because you can turn it on almost like you're putting on a new an old jacket that doesn't quite fit anymore, but man, does it, is it easy to find, and like those old thoughts that you shared. And then you're right, it's an important thing to remember that recovery doesn't mean cured, if even that word should be used, because there's nothing wrong with us. It's just that our brains don't get rid of shit.
Yeah.
So we have to keep adding.
Well, going back to like the no atheists and foxholes, like if you were taught from a young age to the thing to do when you're under stress, when you're feeling fear, is to pray, you're automatically going to go to that coping mechanism. You can still be an atheist, but in that moment when you're higher functioning is getting turned off and fear is taking over, you're going to do the coping mechanism that you were taught. And that doesn't mean you're any less of you deconstructed, and it doesn't mean you're any less of a believer. It just means that your brain is like, I'm scared, I'm stressed, I'm going to do this coping mechanism because it's been ingrained in me since childhood. I still have thoughts that float around my brain that I'm like, I don't believe that anymore. But it's like you said, Jimmy, it is a constant effort of bringing those thoughts forward, going, no, wait, no, that's a falsehood.
That's actually really great, Helen, and I'm so happy to hear that you said that. Hear you say that. I never really thought of it like that before. And I did share sorry, I just hit my mic. I have shared that experience with others, and I actually had family members like use it against me. Like, see, you really are a Christian, and like they remember it for years later. Like when my atheism comes up again, oh, what about that time you thought you were going to die? And I'm like, oh, excuse me, sorry, I was sharing an experience with you about a combat situation that you could not even put yourself, shoes that you wouldn't be able to put yourself in for a second, right?
Mhm.
I shared with you a moment of weakness, and now you hold on to that for years to throw back in my face. I always felt very attacked by that, but I really appreciate what you just said, Helen. That was really comforting.
Oh.
Those are that it is a safety net, and you never know when you're gonna just try and land on it. So yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that brought you some comfort.
But
that makes me feel good.
when it comes to my family though, like my immediate family,
Mm.
I think my parents are great people. Don't and I hate talking about my childhood and like the differences that I had with my parents' way of thinking or way of doing things, because I never want to make them look like I don't appreciate them or they were like not good parents, because they're great people. I love them. But where was I going with that? I'm so concerned about not insulting my parents. I lost my train of thought. But it is pretty tense sometimes with the family. Like we don't talk about my atheism at all. So it's one of those things where like, thank goodness I found my community. I have you guys, and I have the ACA. I do shows. I have come to know Helen very well, but you know, you may never find comfort in the places that you think you're going to find comfort when you are recovering from religion. And so I really think the work that you guys do is really important. And I wouldn't be here if I weren't standing on the shoulders of giants, who were having the tough conversations before I knew how to have them.
We
So I
tried.
guess with that,
You're
yeah.
very awesome.
I'll say.
Well, so with that, like, in acknowledging the continued struggles, what are some of your go-to places to, help out with that?
Well, my wife is my best friend.
Mm,
Thank goodness I found her. We met in Texas, by the way. Two atheists in Texas. Not something you run across. You come across often, but we met each other, and she's so smart, and she's like so easy to bounce ideas off of and give me honest feedback. But I do think that I have been really lucky. I have some friends that I've met in the military that are atheists, who know what it's like to be in my shoes, who I can talk to. I have a sister who is a believer, but I think more of the cultural Christian,
mm.
right? Not a Bible thumper, who's very open to listening to me and hearing me out as well when I'm struggling and does not judge whatsoever. It's so awesome to talk to her. But since I came across the ACA, and I found a network of people who I'm in group chats with every day, I have a network that allows me to try out my own ideas. I've changed my position, I think, on things, just by or adopted positions that I didn't even know that I needed or had, right? Just based on having a network like that. And I've tried to look for networks in my own local area. It's almost easier to do it online because I have kids and I have a career, and it's just like by the time it's all said and done, I'm not getting up out of the house and going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah, welcome to middle age.
yeah, right,
You're just
right,
like, I want to stay home.
right. Thank goodness for the internet. I'll tell you what.
Right?
But I think that's where I found my network. Now, I do still have a very tight knit family, and if I need help with anything else, uh, I can talk. I can go to them for anything. But I would not have deep philosophical conversations rooted in questioning religion with my family members. Not only because they think they disagree with me, because again, I would die on the hill that they don't really know what it is they believe. They've never read the Bible. They have no idea what's in that book. But so not only but I so and on that note, I don't think the preparation is there. You know, I don't think the foundation is there to have those kinds of discussions. I could talk about anything else, but deep philosophical religious talk, I need to turn to others. And I have that network there, like I just talked about.
When speaking of network, to go to one of the questions that was raised, um, is whether or not you've heard or worked with the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers.
Wow. Okay. So I actually have been in contact with their president,
Huh.
but I was not able to get anything going up here. So I am in New York, and the Military Atheists and Freethinkers Association of Atheists and Freethinkers. We were talking a little bit about how I could start a chapter up here, and like I said, for reasons I just talked about, it was a little difficult moving to a new place last year. Well, not a new place. I'm back home. So I'm back up here where I grew up. But I really didn't have the infrastructure to put together a chapter for the Military Atheists and Freethinkers. Where they have had success is in deployed locations where those apparatuses are already set up, right? Where there's a large amount of military members. My job here is a little unique. I am not around military people a lot. Okay, so I'm kind of in a unique situation where I work with other military members, but very few. Okay. And so it's not like I'm on a base. I'm at like a detachment, a remote location. So then the goal was for me to find another atheist group and then kind of use those groups to build my math relationship. But I really couldn't, there's not a huge military community up here. And that was a lot of work. It actually started costing money. And I was just like, this isn't the time for me right now. So I do know him. I do know the president of math. I've spoken to him through email quite a bit. He put me in touch with somebody else in the vicinity who was in the same problem and thought we could work together. And both of us kind of had logistical issues trying to get a chapter established up here. Doesn't mean we can't do it again, but it just didn't work. But that is a great organization for resources for military and veterans alike.
Very cool.
Is there any other resources you can think of that would help people that are in the military that you have you've had personal experience with or know about?
There is another group, and it sounds a lot like Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, but it's not. It's not, and I don't remember the name of it, and I'm going to try and Google as I go through it. So I really
Military Freedom from Religion.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
That's it. So
we have military members in the chat. They know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And the person. So you told me not to use names, so I'm not going to call him out. Although I don't think he would mind.
No, John's been on the show.
Okay, so cool.
John's been on RfRx, so you can call him out.
Yeah. I consider John a good friend of mine too, and has perspectives that sometimes I don't have because we served at different times. So it's nice to have these chats with him. But yeah, Military Freedom from Religion Foundation. I have heard nothing but good things. I have been lucky though, because like I said, as an atheist that always needed things while in the military, I always got them. Because I think that it's not such it's not such a taboo anymore or a faux pas, to be an atheist in the military. It's actually just something that it used to be frowned upon, and I've had people frown upon it to me, earlier in my career, like I talked about, but I haven't had that in a while. And so I've been very lucky that I haven't needed to reach out to other organizations. But I do know where to turn. Those groups are where I would turn. I did consider what did I do? So this isn't a military thing, but I used to live in Florida, and some government offices that I used to go to frequently had Jesus signs everywhere. And I did get the Satanic Church involved. they demanded that the signs be taken down. I don't know whatever happened with that. But they were happy to go in there and kind of make sure that all religions were represented equally, or if not, they would have to come down. I don't know what happened because I moved from there, but they were like, "Hell yeah, we're going to take care of this." It was pretty good.
They
So
do have some amazing lawyers, which seems a
yeah,
little on the
Yeah, they
nose for
do.
the Satanic Temple, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's fine.
yeah. So honestly, I think the Satanic Temple has been a great resource. Go figure. So
Yeah,
That's
I love those
awesome.
First Amendment fighters.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, so we need to wrap up. But we're going to be, and we actually did ask some of the stuff from the Q&A during the chat, but we are going to go to the hangout. And Jimmy, you say you can hang out until you turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
all right. So, we're gonna shut things down. I am going to let you know what we got coming up. So thank you, Jimmy, for being here. We'll have you back again because I
Thank you.
definitely want to hear more of your deconstruction story and dive more into that and not just talk about the military. So 2025, y'all. Also we have coming up and Cynthia McDonald, who is also a member of the ACA and the nonprofits, will be here next
Heck
week.
yeah.
And the following week will be Seth Andrews. So please come join us then. Hey, David, tell the people where they can find us.
You can find us everywhere. We are on all of the socials. In fact, just posted the links for that in the chat. We've got our Facebook page, facebook.com/recovering from religion. We've also got the Facebook support group page for RFR support groups project. We're on Instagram and the TikTok at recovering from religion. Again, check out YouTube. There's also, audio versions for podcasts as well that you can listen to, the last. So as of the 21st, we had 210. So I was on target there. And they can all be found on YouTube. Follow it, bookmark it, share it. This is about continuing and expanding this conversation that we're having and just getting more people involved. So as Jimmy, mentioned more than once, diversity is our strength, not just in the military, but everywhere. The more voices we got, the better. Speaking of then sharing and growing community, benefits of volunteering. I mean, we need help. We are 100% run by volunteers. None of us get paid. Or if not, I keep being told the check's in the mail. But
It's all the
it just
atheist money,
doesn't
David.
seem to
It's all the atheist
it
money.
is it comes in with pictures of Galileo and whatnot on it, so the banks just kind of look at me weird. um, but we're always looking for volunteers in any capacity that you feel comfortable doing so, because frankly, healing comes from helping. you know just because you may have heard that a little bit, like from your church background, go off and volunteer. The reality is that that sense of community can be found elsewhere. That's why we're here, and part of doing that is to give and connect doing so. Um, so always in need. All sorts of jobs besides obviously the helplines, even though obviously yes, we can get help on that. You get training for that. Finding, vetting, posting good resources. Um, like you noted earlier at the very beginning, we do have a resources page, but you can also, I do believe I shared the email then as well. But if you have any particular resources that you're looking to say, hey, wait, this might be interesting, by all means, send me an email. Happy to take a look and kind of vet a little bit of that for you. We are currently, just to put it out there, in the process of working through our resources page. So bear with us as we kind of revamp things and redo, but we're definitely hard at work at getting that, shifted around and helping you out. We also have, of course, the, figuring out like, wait a minute, what is RFR? If we spend 15 minutes, but we have condensed it down to the meaty bits in a 3-minute video on that can also be found on YouTube, and we'll get you that video as well. So And our final moments here, I do believe we have the stupendously amazing Daryl Ray here to give us our final moment.
Stupendously amazing. Wow. I don't know how I can live.
I
I don't even know what that is, but
I don't either. I just started
okay.
with
You're
adjectives
just
and
throwing
right
it
here.
out there.
Okay. Well, I'll put that frame that in my office to remind me. I'm okay, right, right. Hey Jimmy, thank you so much. This was really interesting. And the whole notion of diversity is our strength. I think that's what we live by here. But I think a lot of that started clear back in the Civil War with the military, and it's by fits and starts has gotten better. Truman administration was the first to actually integrate, but as the military moved forward, it was almost forced. I grew up during the Vietnam War era, and I did not go in the military myself. I wasn't drafted, but I had lots of friends and family members that were. So I saw it firsthand what happened when they went, what happened when they came back, and how the military was just, even though it was not voluntary then, it was mandatory conscript. The military had to start coming to grips with the fact that that was a diverse group of people that
Yeah.
needed to come together and work together, or they were going to die. It was that just pretty much that simple. So anyway, I could tell stories all day long about what I've seen in the military. I actually live, Jimmy, I live in Leavenworth, Leavenworth County,
Okay.
just a few miles south of Command and General Staff College. And I remember, I believe it was 1986, I went to the chapel. I attended the chapel there. I was still a liberal Christian, but we liked the chaplain. And I'm sitting in the Sunday school room when everybody gets just hushed. Everybody's just buzzing around and talking before the Sunday school starts. And all of a sudden, everybody gets stone cold silent and looks behind them. And that walking into the room is General Colin Powell to
Oh,
join
wow.
the Sunday school class that day. It was just I'd never experienced that because I wasn't in the military, but I was on the base in that room when it happened, and I got to briefly meet him. Of course, he would never remember me, but it was pretty interesting. And the awe that people had, I could just feel it, of a black man being
Yeah.
in command of that entire fort. He was the commanding general at that for only about a year. He didn't stay long, and then he went on up to become a four. I think he was a 3-star when he was there, and then he became a 4-star. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, the next thing that wanted to say is the all volunteer army has made the United States military come to grips with diversity. Because you can't recruit people if you're going to discriminate against them once you get in, whether you're male or female, black or white, Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter. Once you get in, you've got a common goal. And that is why I think, because I've studied this, I've watched this for literally my entire life. I've been very interested in the army because I almost got drafted to go to Vietnam, and that was not a pleasant experience for most of my friends. I mean, PTSD and all sorts of shit came back. So I've watched, and I'm just convinced that the military is leading the United States. Like you said, I'm just validating what you said. The military is leading the U.S. Not out of choice, but out of necessity. Because if they don't, they're not going to have a military, and you'd have to go back to a draft military, which that ain't going to happen. Nobody's going to vote for that again. Anyway, I could go on, but I'll say one more thing. I trained chaplains. I trained Army chaplains in the 1980s.
Wow.
I was still a very liberal Christian. I wasn't. I attended church only because my wife wanted me to, and it's that kind of situation. But I also did psychological training with the chaplains to teach them some basic psychology skills. And what I noticed back then was most of the chaplains were fairly mainstream, Protestant, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, But in the intervening years, over the next 20 years through the 80s and 90s, the religious right made every effort they could to plug all openings in the chaplaincy with evangelical chaplains. So you saw a big shift between fairly innocuous, almost secular chaplains over about a 20-year time period, moved from very caring, loving, open-minded chaplains to evangelical chaplains. And in the late 90s, by the late 90s, it had really increased a lot, even to the degree that the Air Force Academy was virtually taken over by evangelicals. And that's what, and Mikey Weinstein's son was in the Air Force at the time, or cadet in the Air Force. And he got subjected as a Jewish boy to all sorts of evangelical bullying in the Air Force Academy. And Mikey Weinstein founded the Military Freedom from Religion Foundation as a result of his son being persecuted. And that has pushed the military, and so is the MAAF. Anyway, those two groups. I want to underline something you said real early on. Why you speak out. Well, those two military groups have literally forced the United States military in many levels to change the way it operates and to become more inclusive and more diverse and more supportive of diverse aspects of our culture. So I'm very proud of what our military's done.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. I sit 20 miles straight south of Command and General Staff College, and I have rubbed shoulders with colonels and generals, majors ever since I moved to this area in 1978. I used to be a co-sponsor of officers that were coming from Switzerland or Norway or Morocco to study for a year at the CGSC. So I got to know a lot of the folks in the 80s and 90s. I got to watch this happen. So I've listening to you. I kept having to bite my tongue, say, "Yes, I want to talk about it."
Well, I'm glad that you felt like I had something worth talking about. I really enjoyed being here. This was great. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for sharing all that.